I still remember the first time I saw her. Not the way most people remember someone, not with names or faces or laughter echoing in some half-forgotten room. No, I remember her because she didn't belong. The world around us was crumbling. Cities burned like dying stars and the air smelled of rust, ash, and old blood. And yet, there she was, a spark of something. Pure, something that shouldn't have survived this far into the darkness. At first I thought she was just another scavenger, another soul trying to scrape meaning from the ruins. But when she looked at me, I realized she wasn't searching for anything. She had already found it, and somehow, I knew I was part of it. They used to tell stories, and old, forbidden ones, about beings that could bend light, twist faith, and make you believe in impossible things. She reminded me of those stories, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. There was silence in her, the kind that doesn't come from fear, but from understanding. I watched her work among the wounded that day. Her hands moved like prayers, steady, calm, sacred. Men who'd been broken in every way suddenly breathed easier when she touched them. Some even smiled. I didn't understand it then, but now I know. She wasn't healing their bodies. She was healing their will. It wasn't long before I started following her. Not openly, just enough to feel close. I told myself I was protecting her, that the wasteland was no place for kindness. But deep down, I think I just wanted to remember what it felt like to believe in something again. She never asked for my help, never even acknowledged it. But I could tell she knew. There was always that faint curve of her lips, that quiet, knowing smile like she saw through me, through the walls I'd built to survive. Nights were the hardest. The sky would split with thunder. The ground trembled with distant war machines, and I'd lie there staring into the dark, wondering how someone so fragile could still walk through this world without breaking. But she did. Every single day. And that terrified me, because in her I saw everything I had lost: hope, compassion, faith. Things I'd buried long ago, somewhere between the first kill and the last sunrise I cared to remember. One night, I finally spoke to her. My voice felt strange, like it had forgotten how to form words meant for peace, not orders. She turned to me, calm as ever, her eyes reflecting what little light the fire gave us, and she said, quietly, "Do you ever wonder why you're still here?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because I'd asked myself that same question 1,000 times, and every time the silence answered back. That night changed something in me. Not all at once. More like the slow cracking of old armor. I started seeing the world differently, not as a battlefield, but as something struggling to be reborn. And maybe, just maybe, that's what she saw in me. But in the world we lived in, nothing beautiful lasted long, and I think, deep down, we both knew that. Still, when I looked at her, standing there in the dim light, I allowed myself a dangerous thought. Maybe this time hope could survive. The days that followed felt like borrowed time. Every sunrise was a quiet miracle. Every breath a rebellion against the inevitable. The war hadn't ended. It had only grown quieter, deadlier, smarter. But when I was near her, even the silence felt alive. She moved through the ruins like she belonged there, every step measured, every gesture deliberate, as if she could hear something the rest of us couldn't. Sometimes, I'd catch her staring at the horizon for hours, her eyes distant, lips whispering words I couldn't understand. It wasn't prayer, it was communion, like she was speaking to the ghosts of a world long gone. And me? I just followed, a soldier without a war, a weapon without a cause. There were nights when I thought about leaving, slipping away before the world reminded me what it does to those who dare to care. But every time I tried, something kept me tethered, a pull I couldn't name. Maybe it was her light, or maybe it was the darkness in me that refused to let her face it, alone. We found shelter in an old manufactorum, the kind built before the collapse. Machines stood like tombstones, their rusted skeletons reaching for the ceiling. We built a small fire. She sat beside it, eyes reflecting the flames, and said, "Do you ever feel like the world remembers us, even when we don't remember ourselves?" I didn't know what to say because, yes, I did feel that. Every scar, every shadow, every echo of gunfire. It all felt like memory, not mine, the world's. She smiled then, soft and sad. There's still beauty here, she whispered. You just have to look for it. I wanted to believe her. Emperor, help me. I tried to, but the things I'd seen, the things I'd done, they had buried beauty deep beneath the bones of guilt. Still, that night I dreamed for the first time in years. I dreamed of a world that wasn't dying, children laughing, fields green, sky clear, and when I woke, I found her watching me, not with pity, with something far worse, understanding. Dreams, she said quietly. That's how the soul remembers what it's fighting for. Then she walked away, leaving me there, haunted by a kindness I didn't deserve. Days turned into weeks. We gathered survivors where we could, the broken, the lost, the hopeless, and somehow, she gave them purpose again, not through orders or promises, through silence, through being there. It was strange. In a world ruled by steel and fire, she led with nothing but presence and people followed, including me. But hope, I learned, is a fragile thing, too much of it, and the world finds a way to crush it, to remind you who's really in control. It began with the sky, a storm unlike any I'd seen before. The air shimmered, thick with static and whispers, and in that unnatural wind, I felt something watching, something ancient, something hungry. She felt it too. Her expression changed, calm, breaking into something close to fear. She turned to me and said, "They found us." Before I could ask who they were, the horizon ignited, pillars of light, searing, blinding. Pure, tore through the clouds and struck the ground. The air screamed, the earth cracked open, and from that wound came them. Figures of metal and memory. Voices of the past made flesh. The machines had awakened. I remember the terror. The way reality itself seemed to buckle under their presence. Men dropped their weapons, whispering prayers to gods that had long stopped listening. And through it all, she stood still, unmoving, unflinching, her eyes locked on the storm. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady. "No matter what happens, remember, this was never about survival." And then, she walked into the light. I called out to her, screamed her name until my throat bled. But the storm swallowed everything. Her voice, her silhouette, her warmth, gone, like a dream fading at dawn. That was the moment I realized, the universe doesn't take, it trades. And I had just traded the only light left in mine. When the storm ended, the world was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your skin, that makes you wonder if you're still alive or just the echo of something that used to be. Ash fell from the sky like snow. The ground smoked beneath my boots, and she was gone. I don't remember how long. I stood there, minutes, hours, maybe days. Time doesn't move the same way when you've lost the only thing keeping you tethered to it. All I could think of was the last thing she said. This was never about survival. Those words became a curse and a compass. I searched for her in the ruins. Every burned-out cathedral, every half-buried machine, every crater that looked deep enough to swallow light. Nothing. No body, no trace. Just silence. But sometimes, when the wind cut through the wasteland just right, I could swear I heard her voice, not words, just tones like distant music. And every time, I followed, because even a ghost of her was enough to keep me moving. Days bled into nights, nights into memories, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being a soldier. I became something else. The others started finding me. Survivors, drifters, broken things that refused to die. They looked at me the way I used to look at her, with hope, with need, and I hated it, because I didn't deserve their faith. But still, I led them. I don't even remember deciding to. It just happened. Maybe that's what she meant all along. That survival wasn't the goal. It was the path. We built a camp in the shell of an old city, walls made of scrap metal and prayer. It wasn't much, but it was ours. And for the first time in years, laughter returned to the air, brittle, uncertain, but real. We built a camp in the shell of an old city, walls made of scrap metal and prayer. It wasn't much, but it was ours. and for the first time in years, laughter returned to the air. Brittle, uncertain but real. At night, I'd sit by the fire, watching the flames twist and dance, and I'd talk to her, as if she could hear me. Maybe she could. I told her about the people we found, about the old man who still remembered songs from before the fall, about the child who painted stars on the concrete, so we'd remember what the sky used to look like. I told her I was trying to be what she saw in me, trying not to let the world win. And then one night, she came back, not as flesh, not as ghost, something in between. Light shimmered in the air, bending, forming her shape like a memory struggling to take form. Her eyes, still calm, still infinite, found mine. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only feel. "Marcus," she said, her voice like the wind through broken glass. "You've done well." I took a step forward, reaching out, but my hand passed through her like smoke. Pain hit me, raw, sharp, human. "I thought I lost you," I said. "You didn't," she whispered. "You changed." Her light flickered, the air shimmered around her. "Do you understand now?" she asked. And I did. Not fully, not in words, but in feeling. She hadn't died. She had become something else. Something larger, woven into the pulse of the world itself. And somehow, she had passed that spark to me. The realization burned and soothed all at once. I wanted to scream, to fall to my knees, to ask why. But she was already fading. Before she vanished completely, she smiled, that same knowing, quiet smile. The one that first made me believe there could still be light in this world, and just like that, she was gone again. Only this time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt full, alive, like the world was breathing again through me, through all of us who still refused to give up. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the horizon, and for the first time, I saw the faint glow of dawn breaking through the clouds. It wasn't bright, it wasn't pure, but it was enough to remind me of who I was, and what I had become. Not a soldier, not a survivor, a witness to the end. And to whatever came after. It's strange how the world can end over and over again, and still find a way to keep breathing. I used to think survival was the same as living, that as long as I kept moving, kept fighting, I was alive. But now I understand what she meant. This was never about survival. It was about becoming. After she vanished, something inside me shifted, not like a wound, healing, more like a fire catching, slow, relentless. Began to see things differently. The ruins didn't look like death anymore. They looked like the bones of something waiting to grow again. The others felt it, too. The fear that used to fill their eyes began to fade. They built, they shared, they dreamed. Small dreams at first, then bigger ones, and through it all, I could feel her presence, and not as a ghost or a voice, but as a warmth beneath the surface of everything. In the air, in the silence, in the way light fell across broken stone. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, I'd hear that faint hum again, like the echo of her breath inside the world. And I'd remember her smile, the way she stood against the storm, the way she believed. When I no longer could, I never told the others about her. Not fully, they wouldn't have understood. How do you explain someone who transcended the line between flesh and faith? Someone who stopped being a person and became an idea, a living memory carried by those she touched? I kept her to myself, not out of selfishness, but reverence, because she wasn't just mine. She belonged to the world now. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, a child from the camp sat beside me. He pointed at the orange sky and asked, "Do you think the world still remembers what it used to be like?" I smiled. "Maybe," I said, "but I think it's more interested in what it's becoming." He laughed, a sound so pure it almost hurt to hear. And in that moment I realized something simple. The cycle doesn't end, it just changes shape. Light becomes shadow, shadow becomes light. And through it all, we keep walking, carrying pieces of each other forward. That night, I climbed what was left of the old citadel. From up there, I could see the remnants of 1,000 lost worlds, rusted machines, shattered monuments, fields where bones had turned to soil. But I also saw movement, people rebuilding, children running, laughter echoing in the ruins. The stars had started to return too. Faint, trembling, but there I hadn't seen them in years. I closed my eyes and whispered her name, not as a plea, but as a thank you. The wind rose, soft, warm, familiar, and for just a heartbeat, I felt her there beside me. Not as light, not as sound, but as peace. I understand now, I said quietly. This was never your ending, was it? And in that vast silence, I swear I heard her answer, carried on the breeze. No, Marcus. It was yours. Mine began when I left. I opened my eyes and looked at the horizon. The first true dawn in decades spilled over the land. Painting the ruins gold, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't pure, but it was real, and maybe that's all creation ever needed. I don't know what happens next. Maybe the storms will return, maybe the light will fade again. But even if it does, it won't matter because now I know. Hope isn't something you wait for, it's something you build. Even in the dark, she showed me that. And through me, through all of us who still remember, she lives on. Every time a child laughs in the ruins, every time someone chooses mercy over fear, every time someone looks at the broken world and still dares to call it beautiful, that's her, that's what remains. And maybe one day, long after I'm gone, someone else will find the traces we left behind, the fire pits, the carved walls, the words whispered into the wind, and they'll ask who we were. And if the world is kind, it'll whisper back the only truth that matters. We were here, we lived, we tried, and in the ashes of all that was lost, we built something worth remembering, couldn't speak, could only feel.